Hello, and welcome to Regrets I've Had a Few. I'm Paul Hunter, Artistic Director of Told by an Idiot, and this is a podcast where I talk to friends and colleagues delving into what made them the person they are today. Hello, and welcome. My guest this month is an actor and writer who has performed at the National Theatre, the Kiln, and London's West End. His debut play, Bullring Techno Makeout Jams, was winner of the prestigious Bruntwood Prize and was critically described as utter exhilarating joy. He's also a fellow Aston Villa fan, which is also a joy. And obviously, that we'll be touching on that shortly. Please welcome Nathan Queeley-Dennis.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Not at all. It's lovely to see you, Nathan. I have to begin by saying when we obviously we don't know each other terribly well, but my first conversation with you was when you were on the stage door at the Unicorn. And I think I was leaving on a Friday evening, and I must have said to you, "Oh, what are you doing?" Or you asked me what I was doing the weekend, and you mentioned football, and I said, "Who's your team?" And to my utter surprise and delight, you said it was the same as my team, Aston Villa, which, you know, being in London, you don't always get. I thought you were
There's
going to
not
say
many.
Arsenal or Spurs.
Yeah.
So I feel we bonded obviously immediately. So I will obviously, I make no apology for this, but there'll be many Villa references or questions throughout the following
But
podcast.
I'm glad. No one ever asks me enough questions about Aston Villa.
Well,
So
I've got a few lined up, Nathan, I can guarantee. Especially following the show we made a couple of years ago to celebrate Villa's European Cup victory. So I'm sure that might pipe up. Anyway, it's lovely to see you. I'll do what I usually do, which is take guests back to the beginning. So you're a fellow Brummie, brilliantly. Whereabouts in Birmingham?
I'm from I grew up in Erdington.
Where my father was born. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
cool, nice.
yeah. And have you all your family still there?
Yeah, everyone is still Birmingham based. I have some family in other parts of the country, but mainly Birmingham, between Erdington, Handsworth, and Small Heath.
And so you're the one that came away to London?
Yeah. Just about. I mean, I was it was mainly for drama school. I went to drama school in Essex. I went to East 15 acting school. And then after that, I kind of like I worked abroad for a bit. I worked for Vienna's English Theatre in Austria. And then I came back, and then I was between London if I had a job, and then Birmingham where I'd stay. And there kind of came a point where I ended up moving to London, but then COVID hit. And then after COVID kind of like the restrictions started to loosen a bit. I kind of was at a point of, do I stay in Birmingham again, or do I just make the move? And then I eventually kind of made the move, but I'm still not coming to terms with the fact that I live in London.
I know many Brummies who are like that, but we'll come to that. Let's go back right to the beginning in a sense. And I often start with this question, but can you remember what your first experience of theatre was? Was that at school or a family trip? Or
My first experience of theatre would definitely be there's quite a few. I'm not sure which came first. Um, I remember at primary school, for example, there was a lot of like performances, and I think we were in reception, and I remember everyone got given the angels, but then I got given like the donkey, and the donkey actually had a line. The line was like Eeyore or something, but like that was like pretty cool for a 4-year-old. But then moving on from that, my godfather's like kind of in the industry to an extent, and he always, if there was a new show on in Birmingham or something, he'd always get tickets for it. And he'd always like get my mum and dad, and they brought me to watch a show called I think it's this show, but they kind of got me to watch a show called Elmina's Kitchen.
Oh
Which
yes. Yeah.
on and it was on at the Birmingham Rep, and I was definitely too young to be watching a show like that. But I remember like really, I think I'd maybe seen some pantomimes and things like that, but I feel like that was the first like actual play I'd seen, and I must have been like no older than 8. But I do remember being like, I identify so much with this. It's set in like a Caribbean food shop, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are like the spaces that I like exist in my life right now. And it's the first time I was like, oh, this is like cool, this isn't just, I didn't know what anyone was saying. I knew they said some like bad words at times, but that was like the first time where I really was like, this is quite cool actually. I do remember really enjoying it. It was like, felt like maybe the first adult thing I'd ever enjoyed in my life.
And it's interesting, I suppose, when especially when we're younger, but as you say, to have an experience where you kind of see something that's like your life in some way.
Mm.
I mean, not exactly, but you're seeing things where you go, oh, actually, this it does connect to me. That's quite a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think at that point I might have seen my mum was always really good at taking me to like the pantomime at Christmas or something. I usually go to the Hippodrome for that. But or like a local kind of community centre would have a smaller like kind of pantomime. But and that was always fun and stuff. And then I'd always watch, television, I'd always watch like The Simpsons or Power Rangers or anything like Powerpuff Girls, anything like that. But this was the first time I was like, whoa, that's like, I think I even remember watching one of the characters and imagining it was like, my brothers are like about 15 years older than me. I remember watching being like, oh, that's my brother. Like this character, and
Ah,
like
wow.
that. Do you know what I mean? It's the first time I could really like see these characters as people that I recognize from my life. And I think I found that really exciting from a young age.
Yeah, it's interesting. And do you think you talk about your godfather and your parents? Do you think they chose that place specifically to take you to, or was it just by chance it was on? Or?
I think both my nans couldn't babysit. I genuinely think because they know, like they only would they take me out occasionally, and as I got older, like I don't think they ever pushed me into like the arts. I think the arts kind of like came to me in various different ways, but they never shied me away from it, which I'm really like grateful for. They never like were like, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. They were very keen on if there was something I was good at and I enjoyed, they were like very keen on keeping me at it. So I think if it was something else, like they went to a lot of comedy nights, they wouldn't have taken me, but they're like, oh, he's a bit young, but it's a play. Like if it's too bad, we can take him out of the interval. But I was well behaved the whole way through because
So in a way, you've got your two nuns' lack of babysitting to
yeah,
thank.
having a good social life. Yeah.
um, and what about school? As you started to go through school, did you get involved in drama at school at all? Or?
I like at primary school there wasn't much in the way of it, and I actually remember, and I always did enjoy doing it. I did like the after school kind of drama stuff at primary school if we had it for a bit, but then it wasn't until secondary where there was like a youth kind of amateur drama group, and my year 7 teacher was part of their adult group and they were recruiting for younger, and I was just like, oh, maybe I can go, and my mum took me in for that. But even then, like, it wasn't, I just did it because I just thought it was fun. I just was like, oh, this is fun, this is better than like playing rugby every weekend, which I did at some times. And I was just like, I was like, if one more person hits me, I'm going to lose my head. So I was like, this is much nicer. And then we got to a point where there was you get to like choosing your GCSEs, and I didn't choose drama. And I remember my two like drama teachers from the school like took me away and were like, "Are you an idiot? Like, what are you doing? Why are you not choosing drama?" I think I wanted to be like a patent attorney or something like that because I googled what pays the most, and at the time, like a patent attorney, if you worked for like 7 or 8 years, by after you graduate, and then after like another 5 or 7 years, you'll eventually earn like nearly 300K a year. And I was like, great, well, that's what I'll do. And they were kind of like, what, do drama? And then they kind of made me like stop being silly. And then I ended up choosing it, and I just, yeah, really started to fall in love by the time I started doing GCSE drama, and actually started to see it as something I would want to do with my life rather than just a hobby.
It's interesting that moment. This comes up a lot with when I chat to various different guests. There's often a recurring theme. There's often a teacher or teachers that provoke somebody. And same here. I had an English teacher that provoked me. Similar to you, I had no show business in my background, but a particular teacher encouraged me to think about drama and stuff. And then there's a point, like you just touched on then, Nathan, where you go when something goes from being a kind of a passion or an interest into thinking maybe I could do this.
Yeah.
Was there a particular moment, or did that gradually start to go? Actually, I want to try this as a living.
Well, I pretend I like. I loved drama and stuff, but I still kind of just preferred my whatever you call it at secondary school, like social life. So I still preferred like, oh, I could do after school drama club, or I could like just walk home with my friends and hang out at the shops after school and just mess about and stuff, which I much preferred at that point. And there was a point where the teacher, I think they were doing like a production of like Hairspray or something, and I auditioned, and then I remember there was like a final audition, and I remember just not going to it because I was just like, oh, apparently we're all gonna walk to this park today, so I just did that instead, and then it kind of like everything started to kind of just like get away from me a bit. I didn't really take drama seriously or didn't really care about it as much. I still just did it for the fun of it. And then we did like the next year, I think, like early on, I must have been in year 10, I think. We had an after school thing, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna do it. And we did like improvising, and I love improvising. I don't think I'd do it as much as I'd like to nowadays, but we did a kind of improvising thing. And I can't remember quite what I did, but I remember going, I think that's when I first realized, oh, I'm quite good at improvising actually. And just all the teachers were like, oh, you're doing such a good job. And then that was also like just after I decided that I was going to do like the GCSE kind of drama and stuff, and they kind of said to me, I think they were like, we think it's a really big year for you, just like try and focus and try and keep your head screwed on and really like give it your all, because we really think you like good at this. And they just wanted me to get good GCSEs. I'm sure
Yeah.
they didn't be having a career in it, but yeah, when that happened, that kind of positive reinforcement kind of made me go, oh, is this the thing that I might be quite good at actually, just from improvising and performing? And then after that, I kind of just started to push myself. But that moment there, I kind of, towards the end of year 10, after that whole year, I was kind of like, well, am I going to go and do, what am I going to do when I get to college? And I just decided to go for acting and drama. I also had a good friend of mine who's like a couple years older. She's the artistic director of Women in Theatre in Birmingham currently.
Okay.
And she was at Stratford upon Avon College, and she was very much like pushing for me to go for that, and she's always been like a really big kind of support for me in that. I ended up going to a completely different college because a new one opened in Birmingham that's a lot closer to me than Stratford upon Avon. But yeah, that kind of year and that kind of improv class was the time where I was like, actually, I think I'm gonna like properly try and pursue this for as long as I can.
It's interesting when you talk about improvisation, and obviously improvisation is at the heart of what we do at Told by an Idiot. I mean, we do sometimes do scripts, some good scripts, Shakespeare occasionally. But most of our work is made from improvisation, and I I think it can be very empowering for people when they improvise, when they come up with stuff that's from them or whatever. And it's a thing that I still see in workshops that we run, and I still experience when we do it ourselves, where you go, there's a kind of ownership to that material,
Mm.
which does empower you. I can see why that felt exciting, definitely.
Definitely. It's that, yeah, like you say, it's that empowering aspect, that kind of agency over your own creativity. You can take it to where you feel comfortable, where you feel confident, where you want to provoke yourself without, yeah, then it's just like your own, almost your own authored voice in a kind of chaotic landscape. It's so, yeah, I love it. I love it. Like I say, I don't feel like I do it enough now, but
Well, it's interesting. We'll come to your writing shortly, and I might come back to the improv thing. But so you then presumably find out about drama schools and
yeah,
start to apply. And
yeah.
what course you end up in East 15? What course did you do at East 15?
I did acting and community theatre at E15.
Okay.
Yeah, so an acting course with a kind of focus on community-based theatre and making theatre accessible for like others and people that maybe don't have an access to theatre per se.
And when you went there, was your dream or your ambition to solely be an actor, or where did the writing start to come in? Or what point did that start to
I
emerge?
think the writing had always been a kind of, I don't think I ever saw myself as a writer at that point. And I mean, I'm still trying to come to terms with that, to be honest. But but I think there's this, I like we always, with that there was what I liked about that course is there was a lot of devising, and I loved devising. I loved creating. The same way with like we talk about improvising. I loved having that kind of ownership over the ideas that were made. So we had like the kind of standard East 15 acting training, but then applied it differently, and we made work. We would speak to people in the community, like people from like old people's homes, like young people. Then we'd make their stories into plays either for them or with them. And that whole kind of process of collaborating and creating was like probably the most exciting thing about the course for me personally. And I'd say it's been there for ages. Even at college, we kind of did a course, and I actually found like an old piece of writing that I must have written when I was like 16. I found it like a couple of months ago, and I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like how I write now. Like it's really interesting. And at that point, I was just doing something for college. I never considered myself like a writer, but seeing that you kind of have, I had that same kind of energy in my voice and that same kind of uniqueness in the way I like to tell stories. And the fact that that was actually there when I was 16 and I can identify that now, like more than 10 years later, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and again, that with devising that act of collaboration, I think is really interesting, where there's a collective imagination at play as something starts to take shape, rather than a kind of sole voice or whatever. I obviously, I'm passionate about that as well. So you come out of E15, and then did you go straight to Vienna with the English touring theatre?
Yeah, effectively, I went to East 15. I worked in America for a bit at summer camp, and then I had like 2 or 3 months of just kind of messing, no, not even messing about. I got cast in the job in Vienna like a couple of weeks after getting back from America in September, but we didn't start touring until January. So then I spent the next 2 months just kind of hanging out, biding my time, waiting until I had to fly out, basically. And then I was in Vienna for, well, not, yeah, I was in Austria for like 6 months, and then
Wow. And what plays were you doing?
we did a play. It was a play called Robin the Hoodies. It was like a Robin Hood adaptation. I can't remember much about it in all honesty, but I remember it started off with like a song, and it was for like audiences trying to learn English, and it was really fun. It was really fun. I was really glad about that. I went to drama school when I was just turned 18,
Yeah.
and my biggest kind of envy was that everyone else there was a lot older than me, and they were all like, yeah, and I've done this and I've done that and I've done that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've just been in the education system for my whole life. So when I finished, I was like, I really want to be able to work in the industry, but I also want to be able to like kind of live life in the way that people think life should be lived, which is why I went to America. And I was really glad to get a theatre tour in Europe for a bit.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
when I came back from Austria again, I went back out to America. So then I was that whole year I was away for like nearly 10 months basically, not in the
Wow.
UK.
Wow. And then obviously, you start getting more acting credits, and whilst you're doing your performing, um, I suppose my question is, where did I am right that Techno Makeout Jazz was your first play?
Yeah, it's my first full play, yeah.
And so where did that idea and very beginnings of that idea start to germinate for you?
Interestingly enough, after a kind of while of working abroad and doing all that kind of stuff, I was like, okay, I want to work in the industry as best as I can. And I found myself working in the same pub I'd kind of worked in since I was 16. And I was like, how can I'm always like quite proactive in the way I like manage my career, or I try to be anyway. So I was like, how can I get to a place where I'm working in the places I want to be working in with the kind of directors and actors I want to work alongside? And I was like, you just need to put yourself out there, but it's one thing to put yourself out there by emailing, it's another thing to kind of perform. So I saw there was the monologue slam. So I initially applied for the monologue slam. And then when I was looking for a monologue, I couldn't find anything that great that I thought would be a good show of kind of my talents and abilities. So my friend again, who I mentioned earlier, she said she did it the year before and she wrote her own kind of monologue, and she was like, you should just write your own. And I went, yeah, yeah, actually I do enjoy writing, because like, I can write a 3 minute monologue, like that sounds so reasonable and that's like fun. So I just went about doing it. And then after that, I end up making it to the national final for the monologue slam
Wow.
with the
Wow.
monologue. And the fun thing about that monologue is I've still got a clip of it somewhere on some form of hard drive. But the kind of 3 minute monologue I did in that first monologue slam is basically the first kind of 2 or 3 pages of boring techno makeup jams as it is today.
That's fantastic. So the real essence of that play starts with you writing that monologue. That's really interesting. And when you does it change much from when you did it to being in the play? Is it
I
structurally the
think
same? Or?
because it was a 3-minute monologue, I gave it more of a definitive end, and now it's just got a more open-ended kind of thing. But honestly, it's pretty identical. It's pretty much the exact same thing, which is quite fun. Like, it's not changed that much, and that was 2018, maybe 2017, 2018. I'm not sure.
That's interesting. So you do that monologue, and then at what point do you go, I want to develop this monologue? How do I do, and how did you go about developing it?
Yeah, so after the monologue slam, we had the national final later on that year, and for it, they were like, "Do you want to do the same monologue?" And I just was like, "No, actually, I want to write the same character but at a different point in their lives." So I wrote a new monologue for it, and I didn't end up winning, but I had quite a lot of people come up to me afterwards and were like, "Oh, we really love it," and they'd like give me their cards, and it's like certain really cool theaters. I was like, "Oh, I'd love to work with them." And they were like, "Yeah, we'd love to read the full play." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll get that sent to you next week." And at this point, like, I don't have a full play. I have 2 3-minute monologues, both at like 5 years apart. So, so I was like, "Oh gosh, I better get to work." And then I don't know, life just things start catching up to you in a way, and then I never ended up doing it. But off the back of the monologue slam, I did start getting a few, because I had no agent at this point. I'd left my agent I first signed with after drama school. I had quite a few casting directors reach out to me to audition for different things and stuff, which was really great, which is one of the reasons why I did the monologue slam. And I remember I did one monologue for a theater for a show, and I auditioned for it. I think I was in like the final 2 or 3. And in the end, their feedback was, we thought you were great, but you just weren't an authentic Londoner, which to an extent I understand, but then also to another extent, I was like, as a young kind of black male from Birmingham, um, if every role that I audition for, I'm not London enough, I was like, there's not many roles out there for me, because as a young black male, most of the roles are London. Uh, so I was like, oh, what am I gonna do? I started to have a bit of an existential crisis. But then again, the way I was raised was never to rest on your laurels and to kind of be proactive. And I was like, what can I do? And I was like, well, I do have a monologue that's about a young man from Birmingham, and people wanted me to adapt it. And then I think that day I might have just been playing like FIFA or something, and I just like threw my pad down and I just got my laptop out and I started. Oh no, tell a lie. Actually, I had that feeling when I was because I was working at the pub still. I found out in the pub, and then I went in the pub and I was like working on the cellar, and then I just went on the phone notes on my phone and just started writing a bit, like developing a bit more, because my laptop was broken. Then a couple of weeks later, I'm at home playing FIFA, and I was like, okay, no, what am I doing? Let's get this started. And then I end up writing the kind of first. The play is split into 4 parts, and I basically end up writing the first part of it in that like 2 3 hour period basically. And yeah, then after that I end up sending it off for a thing called pint sized plays, which gets an extract of your play performed at the Bunker Theatre, which is at London Bridge near Borough Market, and I end up being one of the 5 selected scripts for that. And that's when I was like, oh, maybe I actually am a writer here. And then I end up sending it off for another thing called Four of a Kind, which was with Wildcard Theatre, and it was to get a longer extract performed at the Vaults, and I end up getting selected for that. Unfortunately, COVID kind of stopped that, but from that point, I was like, okay, no, I'm gonna get this play performed and put on in the next kind of 12 months. But then COVID kind of put the brakes on it a bit.
But even though COVID kind of interrupted it, it felt the way you talk about it. By then, the idea had momentum. You know what I mean? It was gathering traction now,
Yeah,
becoming this
exactly.
full-length play. Yeah.
And I think the thing that and it's quite sad, because I probably won't be able to do this with anything else I write in the future. The thing that was great about this is, like, this is kind of a condensed 4-year timeline of the play, going from I just come to it whenever I felt the need to write, and it was kind of a creative release for me, a creative outlet. It was a chance for me to express myself when I couldn't. It's that kind of that thing we talk about, the improvising, the kind of ownership and stuff. If I ever felt like I was losing that, I'd always go back and write, and then I'd feel like relaxed and calm again, and like really happy with what I was doing with myself creatively. And
It's
yeah,
interesting. So I totally hear what you're saying. It's really, and you put it very clearly in a sense. So obviously, at some point, this becomes this fully formed thing. At what point do you decide to enter it for the Bruntwood Prize?
like 3 days before the deadline.
Really?
So I realized, because it took me so long, and then during COVID I didn't really write, because some people felt more creative during COVID, some people felt less. I was on the less side, and I didn't really look at it or touch it during that period. And then it got to 2021 and I was like, okay, I've had this play for like 3 or 4 years, and these first 12 pages have brought me a lot of joy, but I need to knuckle down and finish it. And I still had the same process of taking my time with it, but I was like, I need to finish it. And then how do I get this put on? What are the best ways to get it put on? I still think it's really unclear as a kind of new writer, emerging writer, if you want to use the phrase emerging and stuff like that, how you can actually get a play put on. There's not many clear kind of pathways. And the only thing I could find outside of like begging and pleading people through emails that don't even know who you are was like entering for prizes. So I wrote out this whole like spreadsheet of all these different prizes and all this kind of stuff, and I was like, great, I'm gonna apply for every single one. And I don't know what happened, but I basically missed every deadline for all of them, and the only one that was left was, because most of the deadlines are either at the end of the year or at the start, like around this time of year, and it felt like the only one that I hadn't missed was the Bruntwood, and I was a bit like, oh God, I didn't think that my play would stand up well in that kind of field, because, it's not just like new playwrights, it's not just like a specific kind of pool, it's like any playwright in the world could apply for it. Like, do you know what I mean? So I was like a bit like, but I was like, but if I get to a point where I can get some feedback, and I was like, 3 days before the deadline, I just had another look through the play, and I just kind of was like, okay, I had some notes actually from a kind of independent free dramaturg system that was really great, called Freehand Scripts, and I got to work with a really great director, and then yeah, I got some notes from that, which is the first time I really got notes on the full play, like one of the only people to have read the full play before the prize. Like, not many people have read it at this point, and I was just like, we'll send it off and see how we do. And then I kind of forgot that I sent off for it, like had loads of things go on that between then, and then I just got a phone call. Like, I was literally sat in, I think, this room that I'm in now, and I got a phone call, and it was just like, yeah, you've been shortlisted. And I remember like just like going, oh my God.
Wow. And how many plays do they shortlist?
They shortlisted 5 for the international prize, which is writers from America and Australia and other places as well, which I can't remember off the top of my head. And then they shortlisted another 9 for the actual like kind of 3 main prizes.
And then what's after the shortlist? What happens then?
You get invited to the ceremony at the Royal Exchange, and it's just like, oh, okay, it looks like I'm going to the Royal Exchange. And I was actually working on a show at the time. I was doing As You Like It at Soho Place in the West End at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to ask Josie Rourke for a day off. And I was like, how am I gonna go about this? And then I went up, and she was just like, well, you've been shortlisted for the Bruntwood Prize, it's amazing, but also we had this day off anyway. So, because it was on a Monday, which is weird actually, looking back on it, but thankfully it meant I could go. And yeah, so I went to Manchester, and it's a long day. It's a really long day. You kind of meet everyone in the morning, have like kind of like a breakfast with them, go and take pictures. Then you go to another place and have lunch with everybody, and then you get a 2-hour break or an hour and a half break, and then you go to the ceremony. And in the ceremony, we watch an extract of all of the plays, and you're just like, I just want to know so that I can enjoy the rest of my kind of like evening and stuff. But yeah, it was a great day.
Wow. And then with the prize, do you get to perform it at the Royal Exchange as well?
Interestingly enough, with the prize, there's not actually an obligation to perform the show. It's just they will endeavor to perform it as best as they can. unfortunately, it kind of, we very early on after winning the prize, we had a few kind of a bit of interest, but nothing kind of concrete until Payne's Plough offered a slot at Edinburgh Fringe, and but then it was like, how can we make this work? And I don't think the Royal Exchange were necessarily ready for that at that point. So then we had to kind of look to see if there was any, but they were willing to like co-produce it. And then thankfully, like a knight in shining armor at the last moment, my producer Ellie Keel, who just won the stage prize, the stage awards for producer of the year, actually.
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
She came through and yeah, picked up the show and like made it happen, thankfully. And like, yeah.
Wow.
Actually, exclusive. We might be going on a tour this year, so who knows? Manchester could be.
I really hope so, because obviously, well, for lots of work and reasons, I have not seen the play, and of course, I'm fascinated to see it. I was working when it was on before, but to come to the play itself, it's interesting reading about it and in interviews and various things, and it sounds such a wonderful mix of things in the play, which really appeals to me. I like the play I'm currently in, Cowboys at the Royal Court. I like it because it's a real mix of tone, and we move from dance to song, pathos to comedy, and I get a similar vibe from what you've done, Nathan. But I'm also, obviously, as a Brummie, I can really relate to it when you talk about how sometimes as a city it feels slightly overlooked still, and obviously I feel that. And I went to Birmingham University, took my daughter there for her interview, and she said, "Oh, Dad, a lot of my friends don't want to go to Birmingham; they want to go to Bristol or Manchester." And there's nothing wrong with those cities, but what is it about Birmingham? Oh, people don't think it's kind of a great city. And I said, it's a brilliant city with a real vibrancy, and so I could really connect to. Was that something also you wanted to try and express in the play about coming from Birmingham?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It was like I think I think I've got this like kind of eternal chip on my shoulder, and I think part of that is from being from Birmingham, and I love being from Birmingham. I've like love like the city. I love the people. I love the richness, the diversity, the culture, like the specificities. There are certain things that only ways that a Brummie would only behave. I think there's a real nuance to the way we act and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
totally.
And I think the thing that's really good about my play is you could set it anywhere else, but I think the humor especially is such a humor that I think if I wasn't from Birmingham, I don't think it would be the same play. And I'm really strong on that. But yeah, I started writing it because I was like told that there wasn't enough kind of, that I wasn't an authentic Londoner. I was like, well, I need to make a story that's Birmingham, but I didn't want to make something that was Birmingham and that was only for Birmingham. I wanted to make something that brought Birmingham to a wider kind of audience. And like a lot of the feedback that I've really kind of enjoyed, that I kind of wanted to set out for the play to do, is it's like it is just a good play at reminding you that, oh, people from Birmingham do just like live like a regular kind of there's nothing crazy about it, like in terms of it is just set in Birmingham. But I think a lot of that can come from, and it has really specific Birmingham references. But I always say this thing that if I say that there's a part of the show where they go to a rave in Digbeth, and people would maybe be like, "Whoa, well, we can't do that. We don't know what that means." However, if we watch like a Marvel film, for example, and they say, "Oh, we must run away from the Tesseract," you go, "Oh, okay, the Tesseract must be a bad thing." Like, so like, if you can do it with a Marvel film, you can do it with any kind of reference as long as it's specific to the way it's written. You know what it means. Like, it's easy that you can kind of go, okay, then well, maybe like in Digbeth, it's like warehouse raves. Oh, okay, then maybe it's kind of like Printworks or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It's so easy as a
Yeah.
Londoner or from anywhere in the country. And I think I just wanted to be able to kind of harness that. I said something, I can't remember what I said, but something about being like, I think being really specific about where you are can sometimes add a really beautiful layer of making the show more universal in a way.
I think you expressed that brilliantly, Nathan. I totally agree with you, to be specific and the universal coming from that. It's also, I think, that thing about an audience really sense when something is authentic. I really do feel that. And when we made our show, Would You Bet Against Us, with Birmingham Rep, and then we toured it into Villa Park. And it was really interesting because a lot of Villa fans came to see it. And when they came up to me afterwards, they said, "Oh, we really enjoyed it." And then they'd say, "Because you're one of us." And I think they thought I was just going to be this actor, playing a part. Whereas in the show, it's me. I mean, it's me the way that you are you in your play. And I think that brings a level of authenticity that both roots it somewhere, but then also the experience becomes bigger than that. No, I totally agree. And as I mentioned Villa, of course, and we come towards the end of our chat, Nathan, I have to ask you a bit about Villa. Do you remember your first game?
Yeah. I believe. Oh, actually, it's hard. I'm not sure if it's my first game, but it's the first game I remember. We played Chelsea. I sat in the upper Trinity, and the Rise for Self scored a penalty.
Okay, who was manager then?
It must have been David O'Leary. Must have been. I think it was 2003 or 4. I definitely went to a game before that, but that's the first one I remember, at least. I might have been younger actually. It was definitely against Chelsea.
I have a line in our show, Would You Bet Against Us, about David O'Leary, where this is apparently a true story, that when he was going bad at Villa and we'd been beaten, he was on Match of the Day, and they interviewed him, and he basically started terrible decision. He started to slag off the Villa fans on telly.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, the problem with the Villa fans is they're a bit fickle."
They're a bit fickle, yeah.
And then apparently the next home game, there was a big banner that said on the whole telly, that said, "We're not fickle, we just don't like you."
Just don't like it. Yeah, I do remember that. I remember seeing that in the newspapers growing up.
Very good. Very good rubbing with. But all right. So on the Villa thing, I always finish the podcast by asking 7 quick fire questions. You say the first thing that comes into your head. Because I knew you were our guest, all the questions are Villa related, Nathan.
Oh, I love this. This is great.
Okay, here we go. Would you take a top 4 finish, or would you rather we win the FA Cup?
Top 4.
Douglas Luiz or John McGinn?
McGinn.
Yes. Winning an Oscar or scoring the winning goal for Villa in a cup final?
No comment.
No comment, very wise. Holt End or Doug Ellis stand?
Holt End.
Yeah. Home kit or away kit?
This season?
Yeah.
I think neither. Let's go away.
Okay. Chicken tikka pie or hot dog?
Hot dog.
Aston Villa duvet or Aston Villa pajamas?
Duvet. I had that growing up.
Nathan, it's been an absolute joy speaking to you.
So
I can't wait to see your play when it's on tour. It sounds really brilliant, and I think your journey's been a really fascinating one, and one I can really relate to, and loads of people will. It's been a real pleasure. I hope to see you soon, Nathan.
Yeah, definitely. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. All the best.
See you in a bit. Bye-bye.
Dear listeners, if you've enjoyed this idiot podcast, please spread the word